Hello everyone. Welcome back to the channel. Visiting a friend's house or even staying overnight was nothing unusual for us when we were young, right? With that mindset, one late day in 2012, college student Elizabeth Lizzie Marriott stepped into her close friend Catherine's house, excited for an evening filled with fun and memories. However, no one could have imagined that it would mark the beginning of a tragic nightmare. From that night on, she vanished completely, no trace, no cry for help. Can you guess what happened next? Let's rewind to 2012 to uncover one of the most shocking disappearances in the country, filled with chilling and haunting details like a suspenseful thriller. But before diving into the full story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any of our upcoming true crime cases. On the 9th of October 2012, 9-year-old Lizzie Marriott returned home and left a small note for Tony and Becky Hanna, the couple she was staying with while attending the University of New Hampshire. In her hurried note, Lizzie wrote that she was heading to a friend's house and would be back before midnight. But after that night, Lizzie never returned. She disappeared without a trace, leaving no further messages. At first, when Lizzie didn't come home on time, her family assumed she might have spent the night at a friend's and would head straight to school the next morning. But when she still didn't appear throughout the following day, October 10, the Hannas grew worried and frantically contacted her parents. Yet even Lizzie's parents had no idea what had happened. Sensing something was wrong, Bob and Melissa Marriott rushed to Chester and reported their daughter's mysterious disappearance to the police. A search was quickly launched with the help of friends, acquaintances, and numerous volunteers. Police began investigating and found troubling details. Lizzie's bank accounts were completely inactive, and her phone had been turned off since she vanished. The theory of a car accident was quickly dismissed when Lizzie's vehicle was found intact in the university parking lot. In desperation, her parents offered a $10,000 reward, hoping anyone with information would come forward. While Tony and Becky didn't know exactly who Lizzie had planned to visit that night, police, with help from her friends, quickly identified potential connections. One of Lizzie's friends, Nate McNeil, mentioned that she might have gone to Catherine McDonough's house that evening. But when Nate asked Catherine directly about Lizzie, she coldly denied ever seeing her friend. Before we dive into the search for Lizzie, here's a little background on the girl and her suspicious friends. Lizzie Marriott was a marine biology major at the University of New Hampshire. When she moved to Chester that fall, she had to leave her familiar home in Massachusetts, where her parents, Bob and Melissa Marriott, lived. Despite this, Lizzie and her family remained close, and her new life filled her with happiness and hope. Outside of classes, Lizzie worked part-time at a Target in town. Friendly and enthusiastic, she was well liked by her colleagues. It was there she met Catherine McDonough and one 8-year-old girl. They quickly became close friends due to shared interests. The two often strolled the streets together after work, and Lizzie had visited Catherine's house before. On October 9, Catherine invited Lizzie over again, and she happily accepted. They planned to spend the evening having dinner and watching a movie. However, another person was present that evening, Catherine's 30-year-old boyfriend, Seth Mazzaglia. Lizzie didn't object. In fact, she was curious and intrigued, as both Seth and Catherine were interesting people with unusual hobbies. The couple were passionate about acting at a local theater. Seth had previously attended the same university as Lizzie. Additionally, he had training as an emergency medical technician, held a black belt in karate, and had even worked as a coach at a temple in Kittery, Maine. However, from the moment she stepped through the door of that apartment, Lizzie Marriott never came back. Soon after, the police began noticing suspicious details about Catherine and her boyfriend. Employees at the Target store also mentioned that since starting her relationship with Seth, the once cheerful Catherine seemed to have completely disappeared, replaced by a distant and withdrawn version of herself. Catherine met Seth when she was just 17. As soon as she reached adulthood, she moved in with him at an apartment in Dover, New Hampshire. She even dropped out of school, despite previously excelling academically, and avoided her family because they opposed her relationship with Seth. Naturally, her family couldn't feel at ease about their daughter being involved with an older man who had a strange, unpredictable temperament and unsettling behavior. Upon deeper investigation, detectives discovered that Seth and Catherine's relationship was far from ordinary. Catherine, known by the nickname Miss Scarlet, claimed to be a vampire actress. She had posted ads looking for a woman willing to live with the couple as a female servant. This person would handle chores like cleaning, doing dishes, laundry, and cooking, while also being ready to comply with intimate requests at any time dictated by the household. Additionally, she revealed other notable aspects about herself and her relationship with her boyfriend. Seth described their dynamic as one built on dominance and submission, one person issuing commands and maintaining control, while the other obeyed completely. At the end of her post, Catherine attached several photos of herself in mysteriously suggestive outfits. From her words and images, it was clear that their relationship was not based on love or mutual respect, but rather on a dynamic where one person found satisfaction in controlling and humiliating the other. Seth also had a history of participating in BDSM websites under usernames like Das and Enigmatic Shadows. In short, the couple were deeply involved in BDSM, with Seth taking the dominant role and Catherine the submissive. This discovery reinforced the detective's suspicion that the couple was directly connected to Lizzie's mysterious disappearance. On October 12, both Seth and Catherine were summoned by police for separate questioning. For the first 2 hours, Catherine firmly denied meeting Lizzie Marriott on October 9. She even refused to answer any further questions. In contrast, Seth was more forthcoming and willing to share information. What he revealed shocked everyone. He admitted that Lizzie had indeed been at their home that day. At first, everything went smoothly. They watched a movie together, and then played cards with a rule that the loser would remove an item of clothing. Ultimately, Seth claimed that they engaged in a consensual threesome. He insisted no one objected, and everyone was comfortable. During the climax, Seth used ropes to restrain both women. However, something went wrong, resulting in Lizzie's accidental death. Shocked and terrified by what had happened, Seth and Catherine quickly placed Lizzie's body in a vehicle, drove to Purse Island, and disposed of her in the river. Afterward, they returned home as if nothing had happened. The interrogation lasted 11 hours. Shortly after, Seth led authorities to the location he described, pointing out where he had dumped Lizzie from the cliff. On October 13, Seth was formally charged with murder. The tragic news of Lizzie's death struck her family like a devastating blow. Lizzie's mother, Melissa Marriott, heartbrokenly admitted that she had a premonition something terrible had happened. Yet she clung to hope it wasn't true until the very end. Both Bob and Melissa could not accept Seth's account of events. They insisted that at the time, Lizzie was in a serious relationship with a girl named Brittany. Lizzie cherished this relationship deeply and would never have agreed to be with anyone else. The Marriott family pleaded with the police to clarify every detail at any cost, desperately hoping to recover their daughter's body to say a final goodbye. Volunteers, and even a private investigator, were mobilized to assist in the search. Unfortunately, the stretch of river where Seth claimed to have dumped the body had an extremely strong current. That meant it was highly likely that Lizzie's remains had already been swept all the way out into the Atlantic Ocean. Meanwhile, the police carried out a thorough search of Seth and Catherine's apartment. The moment they stepped inside, investigators immediately felt the overwhelming clutter that made the apartment almost suffocating. During the search, they discovered that Seth seemed to have an unusual fascination with mystical topics, especially dark magic. However, despite meticulously combing through every corner of the apartment, the police could not find any concrete evidence linking the apartment directly to Lizzie's mysterious disappearance. Refusing to give up, the forensic team decided to expand the search beyond the apartment. Eventually, in a nearby trash bin, they found a plastic bag containing discarded items, a pair of black leather gloves, a hoodie, and men's underwear. DNA analysis later confirmed that the underwear held traces of both Seth and Lizzie. This indicated that a close, intimate encounter had indeed taken place between them. Lizzie's family was devastated to recognize the hoodie as one their daughter had worn. Finally, on October 17, after a long period of silence, Catherine McDonough decided to speak up. She recounted that on the evening of October 9, Lizzie had come over to the apartment. A short time later, Seth Mazzaglia returned home and joined them. The sequence of events largely matched Seth's own account. However, according to Catherine, after Lizzie had been restrained for a while, she suddenly had a seizure, struggled to breathe, and then lost consciousness. In a panic, both Catherine and Seth tried to lift her, but by then, Lizzie had already stopped breathing. Catherine insisted that the entire incident was just a tragic accident, completely unintentional. No one had intentionally caused this tragedy. Yet shortly afterward, a woman unexpectedly came forward with critical information. She introduced herself as Catherine Fritsch, Seth's ex-girlfriend. She claimed that Seth was fully capable of killing someone. 10 years earlier, when Catherine was dating Seth, he initially seemed caring, gallant, and generous. But everything quickly changed once their relationship became more intimate. Catherine gradually realized that Seth had a deep obsession with BDSM. At first, she was curious and wanted to explore some new sensations. However, over time, his increasingly controlling, domineering, and violent behaviors terrified and haunted her. Seth was the kind of person who could not tolerate resistance, and anyone who defied him would pay the price. On one dark, impulsive occasion, he confessed to Catherine a disturbing obsession that had always haunted him, a desire to personally take someone's life. That moment became a turning point, shattering the affection Catherine had once felt for him. Later, during a heated argument, Seth suddenly lunged at Catherine, grabbing her by the throat. Terrified, she begged him to let go, but Seth remained unmoved, tightening his grip. After that terrifying moment, any remaining affection Catherine had vanished completely. Yet she couldn't leave immediately because her life had been entirely dependent on Seth. Previously, they had moved to a strange city where Catherine knew no one and had no family or friends nearby. Moreover, all living expenses at the time were provided by Seth. In that situation, Catherine had to silently endure, waiting for the right opportunity to escape him. Over time, Seth began to grow bored with their current relationship and repeatedly suggested that Catherine agree to bring a third person into their private life. He did indeed bring several different women into the home, but none stayed long-term. Day by day, he became more insistent on finding a permanent partner. This drove Catherine into extreme fear, increasingly retreating into a state of desperate obsession. Finally, unable to wait any longer, Catherine escaped and traveled thousands of miles to reunite with her parents, never returning to Seth. Catherine's harrowing testimony strongly reinforced the police's suspicion that Lizzie Marriott's departure was far from a simple accident. In May 2014, Seth Mazzaglia was officially brought to trial. The prosecution charged him not only with intentional homicide but also with violent behavior. Numerous witnesses were called to testify against him, including Catherine McDonough. In the early days of her detention, Catherine continued to exchange letters with Seth. They fantasized about fleeing to a country without extradition laws, where they could marry, have children, and start fresh. But that reckless plan quickly collapsed by the end of 2012. Seth began plotting an even more audacious scheme. He approached a fellow inmate named Ryan Bachman, who was nearing the end of his sentence and about to be released. Seth handed Bachman access to his bank account, instructing him to use the funds to purchase illicit substances and resell them to increase capital. He intended to use the profits to purchase weapons, explosives, 2 cars, and a boat, all to aid in a daring escape from law enforcement. However, Bachman did not follow Seth's plan and used the money for his own purposes. Soon enough, authorities discovered the scheme. With the plan thwarted, Seth abandoned his escape attempt but continued to psychologically manipulate Catherine. In a letter, he even subtly implied that they should meet in the afterlife as a way to convince Catherine to consider taking her own life. Over time, Catherine grew increasingly fearful of Seth. By 2014, the prosecution offered a cooperation deal. Catherine would have to disclose the full truth about the events of the night of October 9, in exchange for a reduced sentence from 20 years to just 3. After 2 months behind bars, Catherine had enough time to reflect on everything and realize how far she had gone to protect someone truly terrifying. Finally, she agreed without hesitation. In her testimony, Catherine admitted that during their time together, she had been completely under Seth's control and manipulation. Gradually, he broke her will and stripped away her autonomy. About 6 weeks before the tragic incident, Seth had sent her harsh messages, pressuring her to quickly find a third woman to bring into their household. He didn't want to be alone while Catherine was away on a 10-day theater tour. But no woman matched his expectations. Consequently, his messages grew increasingly aggressive. He even declared that if Catherine couldn't find anyone, she would have to bring one of her close friends instead. Cornered and with few options, Catherine decided to invite Lizzie, who trusted the friendship between them. Seth had seen Lizzie's photo and eagerly anticipated the meeting. Around 9 p.m. on October 9, Lizzie arrived at Catherine and Seth's apartment as scheduled. Initially, it was just the 2 women chatting comfortably. Soon, Seth appeared and joined them. The 3 of them started watching a movie. Afterwards, Seth suggested they play a card game, dimming the lights, creating a scenario that could lead to more intimate interaction. At first, the game was relaxed, but gradually Lizzie kept losing and eventually was left wearing only her underwear. At that point, Seth tried to push further, asking Lizzie to kiss Catherine, but she immediately refused. gently explaining that she was in love with another woman and didn't want to betray her partner. Later, Seth tried again, suggesting that Lizzie go into a separate room with him. Once more, she firmly and decisively refused. Angered, Seth left the living room, went into an adjacent room, and silently put on a pair of black leather gloves, taking a rope with him. He returned quietly, approached Lizzie from behind, looped the rope around her neck, and applied pressure. Everything happened so quickly that Lizzie didn't have time to call for help or resist. After taking the young woman's life, he continued committing abhorrent acts in the apartment with the victim's body. Throughout this horrific time, Catherine sat frozen, paralyzed by fear, unable to resist. She explained that the extreme terror rendered her immobile, because any attempt to oppose or intervene could have made her the next target. Around 1 a.m., the pair began covering up the crime. They quickly wrapped Lizzie's body in a large tarp, stuffed it into a suitcase, and loaded it into the victim's car. Seth and Catherine drove to Purse Island, found a spot near a cliff edge, carefully removed the body and Lizzie's phone from the suitcase, and coldly disposed of them into the swift river below. Having completed the act, they returned, meticulously cleaned the car to remove any traces, and parked it back in the university lot. Seth and Catherine then walked nearly 6 miles back to the apartment. When recounting these details, Catherine explained that at the time, she was in severe shock, utterly disoriented, and unable to fully comprehend what was happening. She also didn't dare report Seth, fearing he could turn on her at any moment. Throughout the trial, Catherine occasionally sniffled, but oddly, no one saw her shed genuine tears. This led many in the courtroom to question the sincerity of her demeanor. Some people even thought that Catherine was deliberately acting to gain sympathy from the jury. Seth's defense attorneys quickly seized on this, emphasizing that Catherine, being a talented performer, was fully capable of convincingly feigning sorrow and remorse. The defense team continued to insist that the whole incident was nothing more than an unfortunate accident. However, they did not deny that Seth and Catherine had intentionally tried to cover up the victim. On the contrary, Catherine's attorneys emphasized that the young woman had long been psychologically manipulated and controlled by Seth. He dominated every aspect of her life, prevented her from contacting her family, and frequently threatened and coerced Catherine into complying with his desires. Meanwhile, the prosecution firmly maintained that this was a premeditated murder. They pointed to crucial evidence: the gloves Seth had worn before strangling the victim. The prosecutor argued that this was a calculated move designed to conceal traces and erase any evidence that could incriminate him. Therefore, the theory that this was an unintentional accident appeared completely implausible to the court. The prosecution also presented other key witnesses, Josh Kolodny and Anthony Hanna, who knew Seth and Catherine. According to their testimony, on the night of the incident, around 10:49 p.m., Seth suddenly called them, insisting they come to his apartment immediately because of an urgent matter. When they arrived, it was already 11 p.m., and the atmosphere felt intensely strange, almost unnerving. Seth sat motionless on the bed, next to a young woman lying unconscious, wearing only underwear. Philip immediately asked what had happened, but in response, Seth kept murmuring the same line over and over. This time, everything went too far. Meanwhile, Josh found Catherine sitting alone in the kitchen, curled up, trembling, and swaying unconsciously. Concerned about the unusually risky situation, Josh and Anthony quickly urged Seth and Catherine to call for an ambulance immediately. Afterward, they hurriedly left the apartment, not wanting to get involved in such a frightening situation. On the 14th of August 2014, the final verdict was delivered. Seth Mazzaglia, then 32 years old, was officially convicted of intentional strangulation, along with charges related to assault and conspiracy. His sentence was life imprisonment, with no possibility of parole or reduction. As for Catherine McDonough, the young woman, then 20, received her pre-negotiated sentence: 3 years in prison. By 2016, Catherine had completed her sentence and was released. From that point on, all information about her seemed to vanish. She never resurfaced on social media under her real identity. Most people believed she quietly returned to live with her family to avoid attention. However, for Lizzie's parents, the sentence for Catherine still felt too lenient. They firmly believed she bore far more responsibility and had played a significant role in the tragedy their daughter endured. To this day, Lizzie Marriott's body has never been found. Her parents never had the chance to hold a proper funeral for their daughter. In their ongoing grief, Bob and Melissa Marriott decided to place a memorial bench by a lakeside in their hometown as a way to preserve the memory of the young woman who left the world so prematurely. They also established the Lizzie Marriott Interpretive Ocean Exploration Fund to honor her passion for the ocean. And you, what do you think of this verdict? Was Catherine McDonough truly a victim, or did she actively contribute to the crime? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you found this content compelling, before you leave, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so we can continue exploring other thrilling true crime stories together. For now, we'll see you in the next video.